In Asia's past, the lives of people and animals were so strongly linked for so many thousand years that some animals became part of the human spiritual world. And millions of people simply revered the lives of all creatures. In modern Asia, animals are still treasured by compassionate religions, and in many cities, they're as much part of daily life as they have been for centuries. But Asia's cities are shrinking the wilderness around them, as more land is cultivated to feed more and more people. In the competition with people for food and space, some wild animals will be natural survivors. But there are others who'll need help. Many ancient cities like Bharatpur in northern India are a home for rhesus macaques. Since the city's first foundation, generations of these wild animals have lived side by side with people. To be so successful, they've had to be adaptable and aggressive, as individuals and as a tribe. But even in this robust society, youngsters are well protected in early life. The daily routines of Bharatpur's people shape the lifestyles of the macaques. They know that wherever humans go, they leave a trail of feeding opportunities. They've learned to trade on the townspeople's best instincts, and right in the heart of the city, they make a very good living. For some, it's perhaps a little too good. Every day provides good pickings. This rubbish disposal service is as much benefit to the city as it is to animals. But most truly wild animals have to stay beyond the city limits, where the living's harder. Golden jackals survive by living discreetly on the borders of the human world. Always secretive and alert, they pick their way through a countryside where good land is heavily cropped, and herds are carefully guarded. Although people share the land with jackals, they rarely more than glimpse their lives as they hunt and raise their families. This female's part of a family of 3 adults, including her mate and a juvenile daughter, who are sharing the job of caring for 5 puppies. She lost 2 sickly pups a few weeks ago, but even so, she's barely enough milk to feed the hungry survivors. With the pup's appetite briefly satisfied, she can rest before her next hunting expedition. Their older sister will play an important part in their lives over the coming months. By guarding them at the den, she'll free both parents to hunt. The pup's play suddenly turns to pleading, which the mother tries to satisfy by licking them. but they worry at her mouth, instinctively encouraging her to feed them with regurgitated food. With a temperature soaring above 100 degrees, all wildlife has to come frequently to water. By approaching quickly and stealthily, she may get a kill. But every other animal here is also on the highest alert, to avoid becoming prey. She can't afford to wait here for another chance. Every 2 hours she has to return to the den to feed her pups. So she must find food as soon as possible. Back at the den, the watchkeeper's acute hearing is always on sentry duty. As the pups play, they begin to understand their own strengths and weaknesses and learn their place in the pack. They're beginning to discover their world. Their first adventures are developing senses and physical skills they'll need to survive. The adults often forage together, but if food's in desperately short supply, they'll fight over it. They share the responsibility of feeding the pups, but each adult puts its own survival first. A weak parent can't feed or protect a litter, so the male takes the first lean pickings. When she returns, the mother has nothing for the pups, and they're so demanding that she has to warn them off. She even checks around the den for insects to eat. And worse, her milk is running dry. To satisfy them, she'll have to take bigger risks. In the short time left before dusk, she'll chance a visit to the human world. Crows are a sign that there may be some scraps for the pups. She's at the trigger point of flight, in extreme danger of attack by dogs or people. With nightfall, even more secretive hunters emerge from hiding. It might look familiar, but this is no ordinary cat. Like the jackal, the fishing cat has close relatives that live with people. And like the jackal, its technique for surviving the modern world is to avoid human contact. But the fishing cat's secretive life is affected by human beings, who can damage the waterways where it hunts. But people also provide other prey, like rats and mice and domestic poultry. The fishing cat's hunting ground feeds crowds of others during the day. This reserve near Bharatpur was first created for hunting, then became a bird sanctuary and a refuge for nilgai, large antelope whose raids on crops made them a pest to farmers. The Saras cranes built their nests before the worst of the summer heat, although a few of these giants still seem to be advertising for mates. Troops of rhesus macaques make frequent visits to this man-made oasis for the simple pleasure of cooling off. But the crowds of animals in this attractive refuge make it no place for jackals raising families. The hunting's lean in the harsher land they've chosen, but there's less risk of discovery. The pups will have a long wait as their parents forage further afield. They're watchkeepers suffering from hunger and thirst too, and as the hours drag on, she finally gives in to her needs. Almost stealthily, she gradually moves further from the den. It seems like the most selfish of desertions, but she really has no choice. Normally, young pups would be guarded constantly. Only poor hunting and dreadful heat has forced this early risk. As they travel further from the den, the adults comb their territory not just for prey, but for clues given by other scavengers. Vultures cover great distances in search of food, unlike jackals whose range is limited while they've young to feed. The flocking vultures are a promising sign that there's food nearby. Overnight, a tiger has killed a straying bull. A farmer's loss could be a lifesaver for the jackals. But first to interrupt the vulture's feast is an enormous wild boar. He'd be such a dangerous opponent that at first only the male jackal ventures into the arena. His mate keeps her distance. He's very uncertain of the boar's reactions if he starts to feed. Such a monster could cause serious injury or death. The vultures are a minor foe and easily driven off. The attacks are a sign of his frustration, because even though the boar seems tolerant, the jackal can't feed without risking a surprise attack. But the balance is swinging in the jackal's favor. With all three jackals at the kill, they at last have a chance to begin feeding. While one attacks the carcass, the others keep a wary eye on the boar. Perhaps their squabbling finally warns the boar he's outnumbered, but he suddenly departs, leaving the carcass to the jackals. If they're lucky, this bounty from the human world may last a few more days and mean the difference between life and death for their litter. Alone at the den for the first time, their playful adventures have turned to watchful anxiety. And then strange noises in the forest spark a panic. The great danger to the pups from inquisitive rhesus is that they could become playthings to be fought over, and probably killed. The intrusion so terrifies them that they react aggressively to the homecoming parents. The scent of the macaques pollutes the whole area and tells the tale of how close they've come to discovering the pups. But now they're safe and carefree again, and hungry. They clamor to their mother for food, and she regurgitates their first substantial meal. The adults will have to feed their pups like this for many months, until they're strong enough to hunt for themselves. And for all that time, they'll have to stay a step ahead of danger. But by working together, the jackals will bring their pups to maturity. Adaptable, resourceful, and secretive, they're well equipped for their lives on the outskirts of modern civilization. In Asia, it's sometimes the past which shelters today's animals. For 600 years, thick jungle hid the wonders of the great city of Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka. Today, the ruins are historical and religious treasures, and a sanctuary for hundreds of macaques, whose ancestors probably lived here when the city was young. These are toque macaques, and this is one of many troops that live in the sanctuary. Like all macaques, their tribes follow strict political codes. They have their own dynasties, which become powerful, then fail as dramatically as their human counterparts. But in this society, it's mothers and daughters, and grandmothers, sisters and aunties who inherit the dynasty. They never leave the troop. Males are always outsiders, who become accepted as mates, then band with other males to defend the troop. Play fighting rehearses them for battles they'll have to fight to hold their territory. It's the females who know their home range intimately, who lead the group to feeding areas, under the watchful eyes of the males. The macaques can eat only a few kinds of leaves, but almost anything else. What they can't eat now, they store in large cheek pouches. But at the moment, the greatest resource in this troop's territory is a fig tree, laden with fruit that's almost ripe. It's vital for toques to raise many young. Large troops can forage confidently, defend their food supplies, and more easily bring their fragile youngsters to maturity. Even the youngest of the Polonnaruwa toques has a special link with humans. For 30 years, every animal has been identified and monitored over its lifetime by Dr. Wolfgang Ditters and his field researchers. During the long and detailed study, Ditters has seen the many problems that humans can cause their monkey neighbors, even when they live in a sanctuary. Some of the macaque troops have become unusually large and powerful by eating food that's brought here. The ruins are a popular tourist destination. On holiday weekends, as many as 10,000 people see the wonders of this once lost city. So many leftover lunches fueled a population explosion in some of the macaque groups. Their numbers doubled in only a few years, and they've become highly skilled at unlocking more food. Regular cleanup campaigns aim to choke back the food bonanza, which will gradually reduce the macaque population. But in the meantime, whenever there are fewer tourists, there are too many monkeys and not enough natural food. The large rubbish bin groups fight amongst themselves and also raid the food supplies of neighboring troops. So the fig tree troop may have to drive off invaders who could steal the future of their next generation. As well as guarding the troops' resources, the senior male also protects his own interests. Any likely suitor for his wives gets a stern warning, but he's more likely to take his anger out on the erring wife. But while he's solving one domestic crisis, there's another one brewing. A senior female is courting a subordinate male. Her high color confirms that she's ready to mate. She checks that the senior male isn't nearby, then stealthily leads the way into the bushes. This isn't just casual sex, it's political high drama. The mating is a serious challenge to the senior male, so this time he attacks the male offender. But the troop's about to face a far more serious problem. Invasion by a hungry rubbish bin group. The senior male's first concern is for the safety of his wives. The invaders look strong, so before trouble starts, he protects his harem and children by aggressively chasing them out of harm's way. His lieutenants are in charge of defense. But they fail to scare the enemy off, and there's a brief skirmish. The senior male stays back, carefully guarding his family. After such an aggressive challenge, the lieutenants make a diplomatic mission to appease the invaders. But the trespassers are confident and launch a full-scale attack. For a few minutes, the battle hangs in the balance, but the invaders are too strong. The fig tree troop is driven off. Some of the victors have been wounded, but they have won the fig tree. And for the next few days at least, secured a future for their youngsters. There's enough for all of them to gorge on fruit, and have more for later. The losers retreat to the limits of the forest and the border of the sanctuary. Beyond the canal lies unknown territory and modern civilization. They've suffered a huge defeat, but they must still get on with the daily business of finding food. There's a bonus on the roadside, rice which is spilled from passing trucks. It's a risky harvest for the macaques, but they successfully dodge the traffic. Until a macaque or a driver makes a fatal error. Unfortunately, these days it's not an uncommon end for toque macaques. As they move still further from the sanctuary and deeper into human territory, the younger males take over the job of leading the troop. They'll be the first to encounter danger as they act as pathfinders for the females. There's another man-made risk in using power lines as a pathway, but it keeps them clear of other dangers below. But the toques are still confident foragers, and people who leave their houses unguarded are likely to find the unwelcome results of a troop visit when they return. Game playing is also part of everyday life for macaques, and this one has intriguing possibilities. Because of their past experience, the macaques associate human beings with predictable supplies of food. But raiding the breakfast leftovers suddenly becomes very risky. The senior male's first warning call is lost in the feeding frenzy. The dangers of foraging in the human world become too great, and they flee for the safety of the sanctuary. Back on home ground, they head for a familiar feeding opportunity. Offerings to compassionate Buddha sometimes include morsels of food. Caught between aggressive macaque neighbors and a shrinking natural world, the troop will struggle to survive. But they're lucky to live amongst tolerant people with high respect for life and long experience of sustaining it. The Toque Sanctuary is only part of the extraordinary heritage of this small island. For over 2,000 years, the land has been reshaped to human needs, sometimes on a huge scale. The ancient people created farmland from bone-dry earth by building great lakes, which still capture monsoon rains. Sri Lankans call them tanks. Some are vast, and there are hundreds of them. The tanks allowed the great civilizations to flourish here over 1,000 years ago. But it might never have happened without the help of elephants. Their feet pounded the foundations of the cities. Their strength hauled millions of tons of stone for the dams and temples. They harvested timber from the forests. Elephants lent their power to human ambitions to raise the mightiest shrines of the Buddhist world. And in Buddhist mythology, elephants are believed to uphold the universe. Nowhere else are elephants more highly regarded. But since the beginning of the century, their numbers have fallen from 12,000 to about 3,000. And only some enjoy ideal conditions like these in Udawalawe National Park. When the surrounding country is short of food, the numbers of resident elephants are boosted by herds which migrate here to feed. Each adult needs about 400 pounds of food every day. So for a herd of 20, that makes 8,000 pounds a day, nearly 60,000 pounds a week, which they'll need for the 50 or so years of their lives. When elephant families meet after months or just hours apart, they exchange greetings. Elephants do have good memories for each other, and particularly for places where they can find food. At this time of year, the park has rich grass along the edges of its large reservoir, while the surrounding country is dry. So elephants travel miles to get here. So do tourists, and today they'll see a rare sight, a tusker. In Sri Lanka, only a very few males carry tusks, and they're usually larger than other males. The bright red patches near his eyes show he's in must, the male breeding condition, when his testosterone level soars to 60 times normal. Some of these youngsters may be his offspring from earlier visits. Now, the large groups of elephants which come here to feed include females who are ready to breed. He's probably mated already, and now he's keeping other males at bay by guarding the herd. But soon he'll leave them, perhaps for many months. Males take no part in rearing their offspring. Their youngsters are raised in the stable matriarchal society of the herd, learning from their mothers, aunties, and older sisters. There was a time many years ago when thousands of elephants lived the good life in conditions like these, on the border of Sri Lanka's wet zone. But these are lucky elephants. Many now have to make their living in far harder circumstances. The large dry zones of Sri Lanka can go without rain for 7 months, and in Yala National Park much of the water is no use to animals. It's salty. It's a coastal park, and in the summer the hot blast of trade wind gales accelerates the drying of the land. And the peak of the dry is still 3 months away. Elephants here have to put in long hours to meet their 400-pound-a-day feed quota. But this male's also following a dietary preference. Elephants love the roots of the lakeshore grasses and spend hours carefully excavating and assembling them into mouthfuls. It's one thing for a solitary male to feed himself in these surroundings. A senior female leads her family from one food supply to the next for about 16 hours every day. A radio collar allows long-term tracking of her movements, as she follows her own memory map of types of food, time and distance. There's little left of the grass they prefer, so she takes them to patches of trees and shrubs. But for a family of 10, the food won't last long. Even if there was enough for the herd to browse for many hours, she has other problems. An adult's trunk extends its reach above the ground, and a well-trained trunk is very adept at plucking favorite food. But there are more than adults in her family. Youngsters lack the reach and skills to feed efficiently, so she has to allow for their needs too. And not everything green is palatable to elephants. So adult females balance a complex combination of needs as they choose a route for their families through the jungle. Yala wasn't always a wilderness. Once there were green fields of rice and reservoirs here, and a city full of people. The days of the kingdom of Rahuna ended 1,000 years ago, and with them went most of the water. Elephants have to drink copiously about every 6 hours. When they make their way to water in Yala, it may be to one of the ancient tanks, or to water holes dug by today's park managers. Aggressively flapping ears and trumpeting signal that the herd wants sole possession of the water hole. Even crocodiles won't tangle with adult elephants, though they might make a grab for a baby's trunk. It's the croc's most recent prey that denies the herd the water they need. The putrid remains of a dead buffalo stop the herd in its tracks, and without the senior female signal, not one of them will go to the tainted water. She's no choice but to lead them off again. Around water, buffalo are the real villains of the piece. Many have bred with stray domestic animals. They're never far from water, and often in it. Wallowing helps them control body temperature, but makes it difficult for elephants to find the clean water they prefer. The sight of buffalo at a water hole, and worse yet, taking to the water, is enough to provoke a lone male. He can't afford for them to take up residence, and moves them on. An adult's dexterity with its trunk only comes with practice. When they arrive at a large water hole, elephant herds can stay for hours. A young elephant's struggle to control over 50,000 trunk muscles is helped by mimicking adults. But for many months, they'll have to use their trunks as snorkels while they drink with their mouths. But after the need to drink is satisfied, there's the sheer pleasure of bathing. Adults and older juveniles make their own way from the water and begin feeding. They know the herd will soon continue its wanderings in search of more food. But younger herd members sometimes have to be ordered from the water. Many messages which elephants send each other are subsonic, outside human hearing range. But instant and simultaneous actions in the herd are often clues that instructions are being transmitted. But there's a rebellious streak in nearly every elephant's child. Anxious aunties rush to retrieve him. It's their job to teach him that he goes where the herd goes. It's a rule he's not happy with. He makes one last break for the enticing water. And then, has a very sudden attack of obedience. The hot winds blow for months. Water becomes more and more scarce. Some solitary animals can meet their needs by digging for water, getting an extra bonus from minerals leached from the soil. But even they may soon have to move on. It's outside the national parks that elephants run into trouble. The needs of 18 million people are rapidly shrinking the forests of this small island. As elephants follow their traditional migration paths, they cross and recross trails cut by modern civilization. Jungle is often slashed and burned illegally, and rich crops planted right in the paths of hungry elephants. In elephant country, farmers work urgently to bring in their harvest before nightfall. If they leave threshed rice in the fields, it'll be gone by the morning, and months of hard labor wasted. The problem of invading elephants is worst where cropland encircles patches of jungle. Farmers face the huge challenge of keeping hungry and intelligent animals at bay. At dusk, they begin to appear at the edge of the jungle. Farmers protect their crops by manning watchtowers and set warning lights outside their storehouses. But elephants have an uncanny habit of turning up where they're least expected. Of course, it's not by accident. They can track human activities with their acute hearing and sense of smell, and choose their best opportunities from night to night. Fires and torches can keep some animals away, but as they become more familiar with these deterrents and hungrier, more elephants take the risk of raiding. Sometimes it almost seems that elephants can stage diversions. While farmers are defending crops at the front line, other raiders take advantage of unguarded grain stores. Houses have sometimes been almost completely demolished by elephants searching for food. They can vacuum up rice in the same volumes as they can water, and quickly dispose of the profits of months of work. If rockets and firecrackers are all they meet, they're lucky. This tusker was blinded by a shotgun blast. Others are caught in snares or suffer other injuries. And these are the survivors of the struggle for space. More than 100 animals a year die in the conflict with people. There's a growing herd of orphaned, displaced or injured animals who need refuge. The elephant orphanage at Penuela is a favorite tourist attraction and a symbol of the intensity of the elephant problem. Returning these animals to the wild is a slender possibility. And elephants aren't the only casualties. They kill dozens of people every year. For this religious nation, the conflict with the elephants they value so highly causes deep distress. But Sri Lanka's history points the way ahead. The far-sighted builders of the ancient tanks also created wildlife sanctuaries. Today, reserves still shelter elephants, and with them jackals, macaques, and many other animals. In the warming sun of late spring, a mother rests after giving birth. Her new daughter is only 6 hours old. But their rest will be brief, for they belong to a troop of the northernmost monkeys on Earth, always on the move through the temperate forest that is their home. Both the lives of the macaques and the trees that they live with are ruled by the timing and the changing of the seasons of the temperate world. Much of Asia is covered by the temperate forests that stretch from the foothills of the Himalaya to the islands of Japan. These forests lie in a broad band between the frozen wastes of the Arctic and the humid tropical forests far to the south. There are two kinds of temperate forests, those that remain evergreen and the deciduous forests where the changing seasons are clearly seen. As the earth swings closer to the sun and then away again, the plants and the animals of the temperate forests are exposed to all the climate's extremes. Long ago, when much of the world was frozen in the winter of the last ice age, many trees became extinct. But some of Eastern Asia escaped this ice, and there the temperate forests now contain a greater number of tree species than in the rest of the continent. In Japan, these forests still cover vast areas of her mountains. Forests of cherry and maple, of oak and beech are driven by the seasons, and trees must evolve strategies for survival. In northern Japan, beech trees dominate the forest. They've evolved a strategy of living long, growing taller than the other trees, and reacting quickly to the lengthening days of spring. Beech trees are amongst the earliest to bud, amongst the first to flower, to be pollinated by the wind, and the first to send out leaves to claim the energy-giving light before it reaches the forest floor. But rather than trying to compete for light against the taller trees, one extraordinary plant steals a march on the rest of the forest by following a timetable of its own. The few Japanese who know this plant call it naniwazu. Instead of shedding its leaves in autumn, naniwazu keeps them green. They're ready as soon as spring comes to take in sunlight while the canopy overhead is still open. Its precocious flowers attract the first pollen-bearing insects of the season. By breaking the rules of the seasons, Nani Wazoo knows its own summer, while other plants have just begun to grow their spring leaves. For the forest birds, it will soon be time to breed. A female great spotted woodpecker searches for insects that have throughout the winter sheltered under the bark. Spring reveals a myriad of strategies to deal with the changing seasons. A tiny caterpillar climbs up from the leaf litter where it hibernated over winter. But the colors that were a perfect camouflage in autumn will soon be dangerously conspicuous, for the caterpillar is climbing back into a changing world. To survive, the caterpillar must follow suit. Responding, like the forest, to the lengthening hours of daylight and the rising temperature, it sheds the skin that looks like a dead leaf and assumes the colors of a spring leaf. The caterpillar mimics the leaves on which it will keep feeding until it undergoes its final transformation into a butterfly of summer. All through the forest, trees are exploding into flower. After the long winter months, spring is a time when Japanese macaques make the most of the forest's bounty. Macaques are perhaps the most adaptable of all monkeys. They've colonized many parts of Asia, from the tropics to the temperate forests, adapting and changing as they went. They first arrived in Japan perhaps 500,000 years ago. Japanese macaques live in troops and move within a defined territory. There are 35 animals in this troop, made up of a handful of males and 2 family groups of related females, each led by an older matriarch. This female is about 26 years old. Her knowledge of the forest has been vital, not only for her immediate family, but for the troop as a whole. Japanese macaques are different from other macaques. They're less inclined to squabble than their cousins who live in tropical forests. These macaques are mainly vegetarian, but edible plants are widely scattered throughout the forest. To get enough to eat, the troop must continually move through its territory. What's even more unusual is the degree of tolerance between the male macaques. Ito, at 16 years old, is unchallenged as the senior male of the troop, even though he lost one of his legs in a trap when he was young. He usually stays on the fringes of the family groups, constantly watching. The family group is the very heart of macaque society, and once a female is born into a group, she will never leave. Young males, however, will leave when they're around 5 years old. They will roam the forest, either living a solitary life or in small bachelor groups, before attempting to join another troop with females. In this troop, as well as Ito, there are 2 other big males. Konzui is 15. Like Ito, he never takes his eyes off the females. And on the very fringes of the troop is another male who has recently joined the group. Only 11 years old, he always keeps his distance, but is a member of the troop, accepted within their territory. The ancestors of these macaques arrived in Japan's far north at the end of the most recent ice age. As the earth warmed, macaques moved further and further north into new territories. The northern shores of Japan's main island of Honshu are as far north as any macaque can go. They will not return to the south, since their territory adjoins that of other macaque troops. These northernmost monkeys on Earth have had no choice but to adapt to the seasonal extremes of the temperate forest where they live. Spring comes late to the north of Japan. It was at the end of May when the new baby female was born. She's now 3 days old and is in safe hands. Macaques give birth only to a single infant at a time. A mother couldn't carry or care for more than one. Babies are born at the time that gives them the best chance of growing strong and independent before winter. For then there would be little food, and a mother would be unable to produce enough milk to keep an infant alive. In the gentle spring sun, the baby explores the warm world that is her mother. She starts to make out the light and shade of the forest. She has been born with a strong instinct to grasp and strong hands to do so. For almost from the moment of birth, she must be able to cling to her mother as she moves through the forest with the rest of the troop. As the females move on, sometimes calling softly to each other, Ito follows. He may be the oldest male, but he's not the leader of the troop. In fact, they have no leader. The forest, too, is moving. The days are longer, and the canopy is full, filtering out much of the light from the forest floor. So, for the out-of-step Nani Wazoo, it's time to shut down. Unable to win the race for the light, it begins to discard its leaves in an autumn of its own. But the rest of the forest is reacting to the sun that is rising ever higher in the sky. On the rich spring leaves of a hackberry tree, the caterpillar that emerged from the leaf litter has grown large and plump. Triggered by a combination of the rising temperature and its own internal body clock, it nears the end of one phase of its life and begins to discard a skin it no longer needs. It will never again feed on leaves, so it drops the head and mouth parts it no longer needs. Inside the hardening outer case of the pupa, the body will undergo an amazing transformation, the timing of which is crucial. For when it emerges as a butterfly, it favors tree sap, which is at its most abundant in summer. It still remains aware of the outside world and is ready to respond to it. A single ant is hardly a threat, but a swarm might be. The nervous reaction is enough to startle almost any predator. After 2 weeks, a butterfly emerges. It's a female. The males have already appeared and established their territories. She rids herself of excess moisture in her body, then rests for a few hours to let her wings dry. And she's ready to find a mate in the summer forest. Almost imperceptibly, the forest too is changing. The green of summer is darker than in spring. There are frequent summer rains. The days are long and warm, and food is abundant for the macaques. With the birth of 4 babies, 3 of them males, there are now 39 animals in the troop. Prompted by the warmth of the summer days, these northern macaques start to molt their winter coats. Each individual is different. Some hardly molt at all, while others, like the 26-year-old matriarch, are losing almost all their winter coats. Ito has shed his thick winter fur. Because he seldom mixes with the family groups, when he needs a scratch, he has to do it himself. Within the family groups, the related females groom each other. Grooming is the activity which is at the very bedrock of macaque society. This constant and tender loving care forms bonds and alliances between individuals that will last a lifetime. While still producing milk, some nursing mothers hardly molt their winter coats at all, and having thick fur gives a baby more to cling to. In northern Japan, summer is short. These northernmost monkeys on Earth are best adapted to the season which will last the longest, the harsh winter months that lie ahead. It's now late June. The babies are almost a month old. As their mothers rest, they begin to explore their forest world. But the last to be born, a baby boy, is still not keen to stray from his mother. The baby girl, the firstborn, is more adventurous. She's already climbing up into the forest. It's a new world, full of wonders. Even at this age, they learn to watch and listen to other members of their family group. And just like any child in summer, if there's a stream handy, the juveniles will take a dip while the grown-ups are relaxing. They're careful not to lose contact with their parents. The moment the adults start to move on, the youngsters follow. Midsummer is now approaching, and the trees are at the peak of their growth cycle. The canopy is thick. But with the tall trees absorbing almost all the light, Nani Wazoo has closed down completely. In a winter of its own, a single berry is the only sign that this extraordinary plant is anything more than a dead stick in the forest. But in the beeches and other trees, sap is flowing. And where it leaks from a wound in the bark, the tree's loss is the insect's gain. The food source is so precious to a male butterfly, he doesn't hesitate to challenge any rival, even a hornet. By opening his wings, the butterfly tries to scare off the intruder. Male beetles fight over the same sap hole. The trees are at their most productive, but summer is short, and these rich feeding sites won't last long. Throughout the summer forest, similar battles are fought and lost. Two male butterflies wrestle over the prize. They have only a few precious weeks to find a mate, and every moment counts. What may be a whole lifespan for an insect is just a passing heartbeat in the life of the forest. Yet the destinies of both are ruled by the same seasonal cycle. Already the days are shortening. The forest is preparing for a time of crucial change. Deciduous trees measure their lives in only 2 seasons, a season for productivity and growth, and a season for rest. On the high ridges, the first trees are getting ready for that season of rest, as every day the sun sinks slightly lower in the sky. Some time ago they stopped producing new leaves. Now they prepare to shed them. At the same time, they produce fruits and nuts, which contain the seeds of a new generation. Waiting for this autumn harvest are a host of forest animals. At night, the forest belongs to small and silent hunters like the dormouse. They feed alone, fiercely driving off rivals. Insects are rich in protein and an important food source, but they become scarcer as the temperatures continue to fall. But not all go quietly. A dormouse may only live for 2 or 3 years, and whether it survives for another season will depend on how much weight it gains before going into hibernation, a winter sleep that may last 5 months. If the dormouse does not put on enough fat, it might never wake up. Autumn is also a most important season for the macaques. They too are trying to gain weight for the coming winter. They can't hibernate. To make sure they get the fruit while it's there, they move almost continuously throughout their large territory, from one fruiting area to the next. These northern forests are a relatively poor habitat. Although food is abundant for the moment, the period of plenty will be short-lived. There's no time or energy to waste on squabbling. The Japanese macaques' unique tolerance of each other is perhaps one born of necessity. By early November, the firstborn baby is almost 6 months old and is learning to fend for herself. The timing of her birth was critical, for if she wasn't independent by now, she would not survive the coming winter. None of the 4 babies of spring can ever rest for long, for as food becomes scarcer, the troop spends even more time on the move. Other forest animals go further than just feeding on fallen fruits and nuts. They build up a winter stockpile. A squirrel, always on the alert for predators, peels a walnut before taking it away to store for winter. A jay also prepares for the winter. If the acorns are too light, the jay discards them. The ones that make the grade it will store in its crop, before carrying them off to bury in its territory, which could be as far as half a mile away. But the jay, like the squirrel, often forgets the hiding place, and some of the undiscovered nuts will germinate and grow. The jay carries the seeds far from the parent tree. Slowly, the forest is being moved. Autumn is taking hold throughout the northern forests. The trees have stopped producing sap. The leaves of deciduous trees are thin and are designed to be discarded. This loss of leaves is a fundamental part of the tree's life cycle. The changing color is a chemical reaction. As the chlorophyll in the leaves breaks down, the trees take back what nutrients they need, but the toxins which remain in the leaves are dropped with them. Each tree turns a distinctive color. Some maples go a brilliant red, while the beech, amongst the last to change, turns yellow and brown. Yet even as the beech trees are shutting down for winter, their buds, like time capsules of spring, are in place. The beech forests reach down to the coast, the northern limits of the Macaques domain. As more and more leaves drop away, light can once again penetrate to the forest floor. This is the season for which Nani Wazoo has been waiting. Now it pushes out new leaves to soak up the winter sun unobstructed by the forest canopy. Before long, Nani Wazoo will be covered by snow, but beneath this blanket, its leaves will remain green, ready to receive light as soon as the thaw sets in. For the baby macaque, this is a new season of strange colors and leaves that are no longer good to eat. She's still finding out about her changing world, still unsteady on her feet. Whenever they do rest, the family groups indulge in grooming each other. Like a toddler competing for attention, the firstborn baby throws a tantrum and is put firmly in her place. Younger males are particularly keen to ally themselves with males who are older by grooming them. Gonzui, the second oldest male in the troop, relaxes in sheer pleasure. The constant grooming serves a practical as well as social purpose. It helps maintain a warm and insulating coat, as well as getting rid of parasites like lice and ticks. The old matriarch is groomed by one of her daughters, while juveniles groom each other. Grooming interludes are brief, for the troop is continually moving. Picking up her infant, a female follows. Another infant, still too young to walk long distances, hitches a ride. Like the forest, the lives of the macaques are governed by the seasons. Autumn is the time to mate. Gonzui displays his presence, then goes to look for a female. His face now a deep red. Gonzui is in his breeding colors. He moves through the family groups, checking which females are coming onto heat. When females do come into estrus, their faces also turn a deeper red. When a couple pair off, they move away to the edge of the group to mate. Usually it's the female who takes the initiative. The male will be interested in her only during the week or so that she is on heat. The oldest male, Ito, is also eager to mate. In many macaque societies, the senior male can have the female of his choice. But with Japanese macaques, older and more experienced males don't always get their way. When Ito approaches a female, she's not enthusiastic. Even though she's on heat, she rejects him. It's often the females who have the final say. This year, all the younger ones chased the 11-year-old male. Her body language is obvious. First, she tenderly grooms him. Then, when he tries to move off, she stops him. Meanwhile, Ito doesn't give up and looks for another female. Unlike the younger male who's receiving all the attention, Ito has to groom a female, something he normally does not do. But while she's happy to accept his grooming, she refuses any further advances. This female also knows what she wants. She's chosen Gonzui as her mate. Yet, in another week, she'll have nothing further to do with him. The 4 babies have no interest in the activities all around them as they play together. And what they get up to is of no interest to the males, who probably don't even know who their children are. Mating for these northern macaques must take place at the right time. Too soon and the babies will arrive before spring when it's still cold and there's little food. Too late, and the babies won't be mature enough to survive the coming winter. As the troop heads off again for new feeding grounds, Ito makes one more hopeful display. Like the macaques, the seasons too are always moving. Cold winds start to blow in from Siberia, a chilling taste of what's in store. The first of the winter snow slurries blows in. Although it's still too early for snow to settle, winter is about to tighten its grip on northern Japan. But to the north of these temperate forests, the winter is far more severe. Like leaves blown before the Siberian gales, refugees arrive from Arctic Asia in their tens of thousands. White-fronted geese, swans and ducks seek out the few northern lakes that will not completely freeze over. No matter how harsh the winter gets here, the one they've escaped from would be far worse. The leaves on one maple linger to the last, a final reminder of the colors of autumn. Below, the forest floor has surrendered to the cold that will endure for 5 more months. The shortest day of the year is still some way off, but already the forest has shut down. These northern macaques no longer have any natural predators. Their biggest threat is winter itself. But the freezing winter temperatures are a hardship their thick fur and larger body mass have prepared them for. This is the season they have adapted to survive. These are indeed the monkeys of the snow. Grooming is still as pleasurable as ever, and an older animal may also provide some shelter from the wind to younger macaques. The 26-year-old female has been through all this before. She may live to see 4 or 5 more winters. In the deep snows, the macaques move only when they must. Each journey drains heat and costs energy. Over the winter months, a macaque can lose as much as 20% of its body weight. They stay in the trees as much as they can. It's easier to travel, and they lose less heat through their hands and feet. They rely for nourishment mainly on the bark of trees. For spring's first baby, winter has been a rude shock. But she learns from her mother and sisters which trees have the best bark, and where those trees are in the bare forest. It's a lesson she will rely upon for the rest of her life. Where they can, the macaques supplement their diet by eating winter buds. But these macaques seldom stay in one place long enough to do permanent damage to the forest. The beech trees keep their buds safe within a hard outer case which can withstand the freezing temperature. Inside, the new leaves wait for the longer days of spring that will trigger their growth. The seeds that have dropped to the forest floor lie beneath an insulating blanket of snow, which keeps the temperature constant. These seeds need a prolonged period of cold before they germinate, almost as if they can recognize the time when spring is approaching. Like the macaques that live in them, the trees have adapted to the long months of winter. Across the broad expanse of forest, everything seems in retreat. Yet winter is a time which forces activity, and animals that are seldom seen must come out in the open to eat. In spring and summer, when the trees are in leaf, it's very rare to see this animal, the Japanese cerau. It's an ancient species endemic to Asia. Its closest relatives are members of the goat family. Calves stay with their mothers for a year or so, but as adults, they're mostly solitary. In winter, the cerau's move out from the forest and forage on the southern slopes warmed by the winter's sun. On these slopes, where there's slightly less snow, they dig for whatever they can find to eat. Like the macaques, they also eat bark and the winter buds of trees. The ancestral forms of these strange animals have a fossil record dating back millions of years. They too are adapted perfectly to the cycle of the seasons. To find food, the macaques must move every day. But when the air temperature drops below freezing, they try to move as little as possible. At these temperatures, the snow will cling to their hands and feet, draining even more of their body heat away. Drawing on her memory and knowledge of the forest, an old female knows the way to a new feeding site. The rest of the troop share her knowledge. Ito is content to bring up the rear, closely followed by a young male, keen to learn from his age and experience. Once they arrive at a feeding site, they all climb into the trees away from the cold of the clinging snow. Only in winter do they sit this close for a prolonged period. Even though temperatures are still well below freezing, the sun is once again climbing higher into the sky, and the days are beginning to lengthen. The squirrels' autumn preparations have paid off. During the few hours that they're active each morning, they search for the remaining walnuts they buried before the snows came. Guided first by memory and then by a keen sense of smell, a squirrel retrieves a walnut and takes it to the safety of a tree to eat. It can take as long as 30 minutes to crack open a nut, but the prize is worth the effort. Forest birds have also remained active throughout the winter, and while pickings may be lean, nothing goes to waste. A freezing mist rises into the morning air, and as the days continue to lengthen, some trees begin to pump sap. But the air temperature is still many degrees below freezing, cold enough for icicles to form. Where maple branches have broken in a storm, icicles of sweet sap take shape, creating a tempting delicacy for small birds. Each icicle may last only a few days. The rising temperatures mean that even as a Japanese white-eye licks at it, the frozen delicacy is already melting. Throughout the forest, winter begins to lose its grip. But this interval between seasons is still dangerous for the trees. Their soft new shoots are moist and vulnerable. A sudden frost or freezing snowstorm could easily kill them, and the tree's long preparation for spring would be wasted. Gradually across the forest, the thaw takes hold. Insects are returning, and with them, their predators. The melting snows reveal Naniwazu, ready to greet the returning sun. Following its own unique seasonal cycle, its flowers are already waiting to be pollinated. Its leaves are absorbing sunlight before the canopy again closes over. In the rhythm of the forest and the seasons, Naniwazu dances to its own beat. The late winter sun warms the trunks of the beeches, and with the dripping meltwater, there's bare earth at the base of the trees. And tiny spring ephemerals take their one chance to bloom. Like the strange Naniwazu, they can only compete by staying a step ahead of their rivals. The melting snow reveals more and more leaf litter. Deep in the litter, curled like a ball, the dormouse has spent the 5 months of winter in a sleep which is close to death. Its body temperature has remained almost at freezing. It has breathed only 4 or 5 times an hour. As warmth returns, it stirs and begins to wake. It shivers to regain body warmth. Its heartbeat increases from its resting rate of 50 beats a minute to 500. It has survived on the reserves of fat from the previous autumn, but has lost much of its body weight. With a metabolic rate so fast, it must eat or die. As soon as it wakes, it returns to a forest that is exploding with color and life. With the orchestrated precision of a symphony, the forest reacts to spring. Dogtooth violets bloom just in time to attract their pollinator, a butterfly which the Japanese call the goddess of spring. Unlike the butterfly of summer, the spring goddess feasts on nectar, distributing pollen as it flies from one flower to the next. All the macaques of the troop have survived winter, and more will be born this spring. For the juveniles, it's time once again to play. The seasons of the temperate world have completed another cycle. Once again, there is plenty of food. The firstborn baby of last spring has lived the first 4 seasons of her life. As she grows, she will never cease learning about her forest from her mother and family. One day she too will choose a mate and give birth. She may grow to become the matriarch of a family group, using her knowledge and experience to guide future generations through the changing seasons of the forest. As the forest, in its turn, follows the ancient rhythms of Asia's temperate world. The snow leopard's kill is 3 days old and all but eaten. Even so, it struggles to save the last of its precious meat. the snow leopard is the top predator in a spare and unforgiving land. It drags what was once a barrel. Both snow leopard and barrel live in the world's greatest mountains, the Himalaya. Predator and prey endure at the vertical limit of mammalian life on Earth. Here, only rock is in abundance. Every Himalayan life is precarious. "16,000 feet up, a lungful of air contains only half the oxygen of a breath taken at sea level. At any time of year, the temperature can plummet far below freezing. And the wind never stops." Despite the cold, the sun burns fiercely through the thin atmosphere. Despite permanent ice on the peaks, water is scarce. The Rambagh Valley in India's Hemis National Park is usually only dusted by snow. It lies under the greatest rain shadow on Earth. Clouds from the south dump all their moisture as they collide with the mountains. The air that reaches Rambagh is dry and cold. The snow leopard hates to share its kill. The cat hunts alone in the twilight and at night. Only very rarely does it reveal itself to its prey or to humans. Stealth and mystery are its greatest weapons. Even for the snow leopard, a healthy barrel is no easy kill. Barrel are at home on the sheer cliffs, where a predator in pursuit of prey risks plummeting to its own death. Barrel are one of 6 different Himalayan species of mountain sheep and goat. They graze all over the mountains, but the key events in their lives happen in this vertical landscape. To extract maximum oxygen from the thin air, barrel blood is rich in red cells. Short legs reduce heat loss and lower the center of gravity. Barrel hooves are soft and rubbery for grip. Its gut generates heat as it digests. Hollow hair fibers retain that heat. And the barrel's top coat is perfect camouflage. Like the barrel, the snow leopard is a specialist mountaineer. It too has short legs. Its ears and testicles are drawn deep into its multi-layered fur coat. In extreme cold, it will wrap itself in its lush tail. December in Rambagh Valley is the time of the barrel rut. For most of the year, mature males live apart from the main herd. Now they follow the scent of females, who are almost ready to breed. For 2 weeks, mating will be the barrel's obsession. female barrel are half the weight of large males. They come into season only 4 weeks after weaning this year's infants. Penis mouthing is both threat and promise. Size is important to Barrel, not just penises, but horns and body mass. Males move quickly from display to direct contest. A winner shows his dominance by mounting the loser. A younger male submits by rubbing his face under the big male's tail. During the rut, males study female urine. Taste and smell tell him when she's ready to mate. The dominant male postures for a female he detects is ready. Pursuit begins. Females always run from their suitors. More nimble, they head for the cliffs. It takes a large and skillful male to trap a female on his own. By forcing potential mates to pursue her, the female usually ensures her offspring are sired by the biggest, strongest animals. Soon the whole herd occupies the rutting cliffs. Even if they fail to establish dominance, males still try to mate. But to pass on their genes, they must fight dangerous battles. A lone female is pursued by a group of males. No one male takes control, and none will back down. On another part of the cliff, the dominant male goes unchallenged. For his partner, courting is exhausting, but safe. Success at last. The big male will mate with the female many times over the next 2 days. He will threaten and fight off any competition. 4 hours on, the brawl over the lone female continues. During the rut, Barrel take huge risks. They neglect to eat and drink. Mating leaves the herd exhausted and some injured. The rut provides an opportunity for the snow leopard just when it needs it. Prey has become scarce, with small animals in hibernation for the winter. The snow leopard breeding season in January requires adults to hunt less while they search for mates. Tired and crippled Barrel will nourish the cat over this difficult time. Higher up the valley, a young Tibetan wolf has been driven from the pack into which he was born. He comes upon a pack of 3. Lacking the individual power of big cats, wolves must work together to kill larger prey. The lone wolf is desperate to join a pack. Very carefully, the outsider introduces himself. A pack that can kill large prey with 3 has no need of a 4th mouth to feed. But the young wolf will continue to shadow the pack. In the vast Himalaya, it could be many hungry weeks before he finds another that might accept him. Humans have lived in Rumbak for hundreds of years. The Himalaya is an intersection of great cultures and nations. It's a terrible place to farm, especially in winter. Families depend on the milk and meat of domestic animals. Their dung is essential fuel. The farmers' Buddhist code demands they don't kill wild animals, but that belief is sorely tested. Domestic stock are an easy opportunity for predators. High above, the wolf pack has killed a mule. They make the most of the carcass. It may be many days and miles before the pack kills again. Feeding, the pack's strict hierarchy is clear. The dominant wolf shows its status by raising its tail. The others submit by rolling on their backs. The lone wolf can only watch. Like the magpie, he is a scavenger. Well fed, the pack leaves. The young wolf waits until they are far away. Movement of animals between packs is essential to prevent inbreeding, but for individuals, it's traumatic. The outsider is justifiably wary. If the pack finds him on the carcass, he may be killed. The young wolf could survive on small prey and scraps, but he will never breed unless he joins a pack. He will never stop trying. A bearded vulture waits for the lone wolf to leave. First to the kill are the yellow-billed choughs. The bearded vulture is in no hurry. It will circle the carcass many times to ensure the wolf is long gone. With a wingspan over 9 feet, there's no quick getaway. In the Himalaya, many species of birds scavenge meat, but the bearded vulture has an advantage over all its competitors. It eats bone. While it will sometimes take flesh, it prefers the shards scattered by the wolves. To digest its hard diet, the bird's gut is highly acidic. It can swallow bones up to 10 inches long. Late winter, the streams begin to thaw. Insect larvae have survived beneath the ice, where only the dipper is tough enough to hunt them. It has extraordinarily strong toes to hold itself against the current. Air trapped beneath its plumage protects the bird against the cold. In spring, people plant barley and peas. They get a single crop each year from the small parts of the valley floor they can irrigate by diverting streams. The crop will be just enough for each family to feed itself and its animals through winter. As the days lengthen, many animals climb. The upper slopes are no longer barren. Varroa devour the first green grazing of the year. The females are 2/3 of the way through their pregnancies. Straight after the rut, the older male varroa left the females and young to form separate herds. Female varroa have their own hierarchies. Dominant females get right of way on the cliffs and better access to food. More plentiful grazing means they now have the energy to fight. And sometimes even to play. the slopes above, the male Baral herd faces colder weather. They test each other in preparation for the next rut. But spring battles are less serious than contests to come. The male herd grazes on the tough, less nutritious plants that grow in the upper valley. The split from the main herd ensures large males don't compete with pregnant females for the best food. This spring, a male wolf lingers in the upper reaches of Rumbak Valley. Wolves prefer to hunt in the open, where they can wear down their prey over a long chase. The wolf would struggle to bring down an adult Baral male on his own, but the female and young Baral herd across the valley is a good prospect. For the wolf, there's no point following the Baral onto the cliffs. He lacks the agility to kill there. In the Himalaya, a large proportion of the land is straight up and down. Whenever threatened, Baral flee to this vertical world. But here, the snow leopard is just as agile as its prey. A female wolf waited while her mate tested the Baral herd. Usually they would hunt together, but the female rests often. She is wary and seldom moves from a small territory. Her teats are extended. She has priorities other than hunting. Her 7 pups were born blind and helpless. Now they're 5 weeks old. They spend most of the day outside the hole in the ground, which is their den. Wolf pup games help build the strength and coordination they will require for hunting. And contests teach the pups how to win and lose the fights which establish pack hierarchy. While the pups are out in the open, the male wolf guards the den. He knows the attraction of his pups to eagles or even other wolves. He patrols a territory with a den at its center. He scent marks continually. Each morning and evening, the wolf proclaims his domain. The den is above the grazing range of the wolf's favored prey. Once, the Tibetan argali was a major source of food for the wolf packs. Hunting by humans has reduced the argali population to a few remnant herds. Unlike Barrel, argali never escape to the cliffs. Their long legs make them poor climbers, but fast runners. The argali is the largest sheep in the world. This male's skull and horns weigh more than 40 pounds. As much as for meat, they have been shot for their trophy heads. Humans not only hunt wild animals, they also take their food. In the warmer months, farmers bring their flocks to graze on the high pastures. A domestic goat is irresistible to a predator. The wolf family is always hungry. The male wolf doesn't even waste the skin from an old kill. He hunts for a family of 9. To ration its consumption, he stashes the remains of a goat well away from the pups. Outside protected areas like Rambach, the contest between wolves and people most often results in the slaughter of pups. The pups first tried meat 2 weeks ago. They've developed voracious appetites. But they're still too small to rip the meat away from bone. The male won't feed the pups close to the den. Scraps attract vermin and disease. By licking at their father's mouth, the pups force him to deliver. Like wolves, golden eagles breed in the early spring so that they can raise their young when it's warmer and prey more plentiful. The eagle chicks are 3 days old. They hatched a day apart, but already the eldest is clearly in charge. The golden eagle seldom drinks. It gets moisture from flesh. Unlike mammals, birds don't suffer at high altitude. Their more efficient lungs cope easily with the thin air. The adult feeds the dominant chick until it can eat no more. Only then will it feed its sibling. Usually, the younger chick dies from hunger and harassment by its elder. But so far this spring, prey is plentiful, and both chicks get enough. Golden eagles have nested on this ledge for more than 100 years. Perhaps one reason golden eagles have kept coming to this place is its proximity to a rich food source. Himalayan marmots emerged 3 weeks ago from a 6-month hibernation. Marmots are fast-breeding rodents. In the warmer half of the year, they're an important source of food for Himalayan carnivores, including snow leopards and wolves. Marmot burrows honeycomb a sunny slope. Their diggings and droppings encourage grass growth. Despite the risk from predators, they spend most of their days above ground. Marmots must pack a year's eating into half that time. In the first few weeks of spring, marmots breed. They mate underground where it's safer, but hierarchies are established in contests outside the burrows. Marmot battles can be serious, but this match is as much ritual as fight. An eagle can spot a marmot more than a mile away. Defenseless alone, marmots have a group warning system. The marmots waste no time in getting back out on the grass. The death of one ensures the temporary safety of the colony. The cliffside nest is without shade all afternoon. The air is a few degrees above freezing, but direct sunlight can heat a rock or an eagle chick to more than 100 degrees. With only thin down to protect them, the eagle chicks could easily die. Fortunately, an adult eagle can easily provide shade. The wolf family stays at the den only as long as it must. Settled, they are most at risk from people. The pups are now 7 weeks old. Their mother will not suckle them for much longer. With a promise of milk, she entices her brood away from the den for the last time. The male will lead his family many miles before he allows them to rest. The pup's endless roaming across the Himalaya has begun. It's likely that only a few will survive even their first winter. Summer. The bounty will last 8 short weeks. The valley floors are irrigated by snow melt off the peaks, but steeper slopes remain dry. New growth must cope with burning sun and freezing nights. Astragala's fur acts as insulation in both extremes. Pods are a greenhouse around tender new seeds. Other plants hug the rocks to stay out of the chilling, drying wind. For Barul, these are the months of plenty. They convert summer growth into fat. They shed old winter coats and begin growing new ones. As snow and ice retreat higher up the peaks, female Barul leave the herd. They seek the caves and crevices of the most difficult terrain of the valley. They are about to give birth. The snow leopard shares the Barul's time of plenty. Lone pregnant females and defenseless infants are the easiest killing of the year. In the meadows below, there's the chance of fresh food for another ferocious predator, the tiny Himalayan weasel. In a treeless place, all birds nest on the ground. Horned lark chicks merge with the new grass of the meadows. The horned lark is a summer migrant from lower altitudes. It feeds on insects that appear during the few weeks of warmth. Wary of attracting predators, the adult male stops only long enough to shovel in food and clear away the infant's fecal sacs. Far above and far safer, the golden eagle chicks are now 7 weeks old. That both chicks are still alive is testament to the bounty of the marmot colony and the hunting skills of the adults. The chicks are now large enough to be safe from heat and cold. The parents' visits to the crowded nest are brief. The chicks are still 6 weeks away from flying. Each chick now eats almost as much as an adult. Conveniently, a new source of food is now available. Amongst the carnage of the nest are the tiny hooves of a newborn Barul. Two days after birth, Barul kids and their mothers rejoin the herd. On the open slopes, infants form nursery groups. Kids demand milk. In lean years, infants may be kicked away after a few seconds feeding. This year, mothers let their young suckle often and long, a sign that food is plentiful. If they are to survive, Barrel kids must quickly learn to be at home on the cliffs. Barrel mothers climb with their young. Twins are rare. Females invest all their energies in a single kid. Like marmots, Barrel infants are hunted from every quarter. They have only the vigilance of their mothers for protection. Mothers always place themselves between their offspring and the drop. The infant-mother bond will remain strong even after the kids are weaned at 5 months. By then, it will be freezing cold. Food will be scarce. Despite the best efforts of their mothers, half the kids die in their first year. Autumn. The bloom is a distant memory. Barrel have begun to burn summer fat. Tough times too for the snow leopard. Marmots are in hibernation under frozen ground. Barrel are yet to exhaust themselves at the rut. Cold feeds the cat's hunger. In autumn, most alpine plants disappear from the surface. Barrel must burn precious energy digging for roots. Near the end of the day, an adult female moves closer to the cliffs for safety. She is sick or exhausted. The snow leopard killed the young female just before dawn. The rest of the Barrel group have fled far up the valley. The cat starts on liver and kidneys, the richest and most easily consumed part of its prey. Within hours, the smell of blood attracts a red fox. Magpie and fox know the cat has killed far more than it can eat at one sitting. The morning sun finds the snow leopard too full to eat, and 2/3 of the carcass still remaining. Snow leopards are seldom so exposed in daylight. In direct sun, they quickly overheat beneath their fur. The cat's instinct is to climb into the crags above the kill and digest. It's the moment the magpies have been waiting for. The bearded vulture won't land with a snow leopard anywhere near the carcass, but its presence is a flag to other scavengers. The snow leopard is torn between protecting its kill and the cool, concealing shadows above. Eventually, the instinct to climb wins out. The snow leopard has been gone for only 10 minutes. The scavengers take their chance. After just half an hour, the snow leopard is forced to return. The barrel is still too heavy to shift. The snow leopard's only option is to stay and eat. Three days after it died, the barrow carcass can be dragged. The snow leopard begins the exhausting haul to save the last of its precious meat. The Himalaya presents no easy opportunities to the animals that breathe its thin air. Soon, the Baral males will once again have to posture and fight in order to mate. In these mountains, every step of every day is a struggle. Only the tough and the lucky endure. Tonight, the snow leopard will finish its kill. Then it will disappear into the shadows, its mystery preserved until the chance comes to kill again. Sri Lanka's and Asia's challenge is to strengthen and defend these refuges between two worlds.